me to kind of take over.
For your mother-in-law?
Hey! For me, because we want to move from there to.
Oh,
I wanna
this is
take
your
over.
mother-in-law's neighbor and you want to buy it.
Exactly.
Got it.
Your repertoire? Well, you know. She's like a mogul.
No,
Totally.
900 and
Totally.
rental properties.
No, I'm like a small fish. So basically, I did it. That's like that's the only way. So what happens if I did a contract, which kind of covered us up, and I paid him down payment. I pay him every month. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
If I want to sell it, it's going to be very tricky, right? Because I
owns
hold
it.
the title. Yeah.
Right.
Is there a way to do a contract between? Because he doesn't care. We set on a price.
Doesn't he need the money? Doesn't
No.
he need the proceeds?
He gets money every month. He's totally fine with it.
He doesn't want the equity.
No, because I bought it like 40 grand under.
Wow.
So if I turn it today, I can make. good
Wow.
money.
Yeah, I mean, when it sells eventually, he would be the seller.
So there's no so I know that there's remember the minimum amount that if I would sell it, the extra would go to the realtor. That's illegal in Minnesota, right? If I sell it for whatever.
Yeah, we don't do that here.
Okay.
I've never even heard of that, but.
Yeah, some states do, some states don't.
Okay.
So there's no contract that I can do with him to sell the house as a realtor and then somehow make sure that.
I need to think about that. I don't think so. Now, there is something called a quitclaim deed where he could literally just give you the deed to the property. He literally just signs it over to you. But then he wouldn't get any of the proceeds. And you wouldn't have a mortgage on it. He'd be giving it to you like free and clear.
But he's gonna be, but the mortgage company, wouldn't they want their money full and paid off?
No, not necessarily. As long as he continues to pay the mortgage and you continue to pay him, I think he can give you title to the property.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going? Good. Yeah, this is very complicated. I
Yes.
think we should talk about it again at another time. Well, everyone came in a wave.
We're just doing our orientation.
Oh, of course you were. Oh, good. We have not met aside from email. Remind me your name?
Cody.
Cody.
Nice to meet you.
I'm Melissa Johnson. I'm the broker here.
Okay.
Yeah, what'd you do before real estate?
I'm a police officer.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Well, my heart goes out to you. It's not an easy role to have,
No, it's not.
considering the climate of society. I'm Melissa Johnson. It's nice to meet you. Good to chat. Very good to meet you. We have exchanged an email or two. Yeah, well, welcome.
It was just like me, like, I don't know. Let's just respect me.
No problem. Not a problem at all. I'll give you my business card and then some paperwork that will go for today. No one wants to be in the front row?
I don't want my head blocking,
Yes, that's true. Hello, everyone on Zoom. It looks like there's a couple of you. Can you say hi?
Hi.
Good. I just want to make sure that we had an okay connection this time.
Hello.
Hello. All right. Well, I'm going to share my screen and get started rather than the video. Can you guys on Zoom let me know if you can see my screen at this point? I'm going to pull up a Google browser.
I can see your screen.
A minute. You
Yep,
can
we can see it.
wait. Okay, good. I introduced myself on Saturday when a majority of us were together for the seller bootcamp. So I will try to avoid being too redundant. But just a little bit of background. This is my 21st year in real estate, but it's actually my first 3 months with Keller Williams. So I am in the class of 2021, right along with you. We are all new to this company together, though I have some more experience in the industry. It's very company specific here at Keller Williams, the systems and the processes. So I want you to know you're not alone. You're together with this group, but you're also together with me as we learn as we go. And I'm not kidding. Every single day there is something new that I learn in real estate. I just learned something new from Yuppie, and we'll probably learn about 10 new things from her experience. Have you already moved in to that place?
No, in 2 weeks.
Okay, so the move-in date of the leasing contract is in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, the purpose of the meeting today is to go over all the documents that you guys will need in representing someone who's buying a property, and then offering on whatever they want to buy. So making a purchase agreement or offer to purchase the new house, the new land, the new condo, whatever it might be. And I'll go over the forms on my computer. We're literally going to start at square one. I shared on Saturday that there are a lot of different personality types in the world. There's people who are excited and bubbly. There are people who are strong decision makers and they're very concise. There's people who are very timid and they're really unsure if they even deserve to buy this new house. So my number one recommendation as you start out in your career in real estate is try to put your personality in the backseat and try to really observe the personality of the buyer that you're out looking at houses with. Try to mirror them essentially. You're going to do that when you're talking with them on the phone. You're going to do that when you're showing houses to them, but you're also really going to want to do that when you go over all this paperwork. Because if you're dealing with someone super duper analytical, if you skip over one of these bolded sections, they are going to be suspicious of you. But if you're working with someone who is like easily distracted and all over the place, and when do I just get to move in? If you go over line by line, they are going to be so bored. They're probably going to be really overwhelmed and they might even start to feel nervous and a little bit of that buyer's remorse. So though today I'm going to go over them in a little bit more detailed fashion to educate you, I highly recommend before you do exactly what I do, that you try to really nail down the personality type of the consumer that you're working with and writing up this paperwork and try to go at their pace. Any comments or questions or suggestions about that after those of you who heard my example on Saturday and kind of digested it?
That's very useful.
Good, good. We can talk about that individually at another time. We just don't want to be too boring and redundant. So, one fun thing that I've learned since being here at Keller Williams is they do a really good job of getting to know everyone who works here. So I'm going to do just a really brief around the room. You don't need to give me your life history or your career history. Instead, because it's a beautiful sunny spring day, you're going to tell me what would be your go-to flavor at Dairy Queen. If you were to pull up, sunroof open, birds are chirping, you're feeling like it's summer, you can officially order a blizzard from Dairy Queen. And Yuppie, what would you order?
Cookie crumble if they have any, I don't know.
Ooh, cookie crumble, like Oreo cookie
I
crumbles?
like Oreos.
Oh yeah.
I do old school. I like old school.
So good. Molly, what would you order?
You know, I'm gonna bypass the blizzard and go for a chocolate dipped vanilla cone.
Ooh,
Just old school simple.
so good. Who wants to go next in the middle?
Chocolate chip cookie dough.
Yum.
Yup. And drumstick with chocolate ice cream.
They have that at Dairy Queen? A drumstick.
Blizzard. It's a drumstick.
Ooh, so they like crumble the waffle cone and everything in it?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, delicious. Cody, how about you?
I know, I'm like, okay.
You got a lot of ladies, a lot of chit chat in here.
I'd say mint Oreo blizzard.
Oh,
Ooh,
man.
yum, mint Oreo. How about for you?
That's it, we're going. Why not? Yeah, field trip.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, everyone pack up, we're out of here. It's that sunny spring day. Would you remind me how to pronounce your name again, please? Khadijah with a K? Khadijah. Okay. Oh, you know what? I actually have a registration form that I need you guys all to fill out. So we'll start with Cody here. Would you put today's date on the top? Thank you. And then just write your name down. Okay. Well, last but not least, that would be moi. I really do like blizzards. I don't treat myself to them very often, but when I was pregnant, I was kind of addicted to their banana cream blizzard. So it has like little pieces of pie crust. It has fresh slices of bananas in it and like whipped cream. It's really white and like whipped, almost like whipped cream. This is so good. I highly recommend it. Highly, highly recommend it. All right, well, do me a favor. And when you write your first purchase agreement, swing by Dairy Queen and celebrate yourself and think of me, think of me, think of me. All right. Well, when we were together on Saturday, I was saying that I think that the seller paperwork is actually a little bit easier than the buyer paperwork. And the key reason I find that to be is because if you're doing an appointment with a seller, you have researched. You've researched their property, you've researched their names, you know a little bit about the house because you probably looked at it on the MLS. And so you can walk into that appointment with all of your paperwork very carefully prepared. You can spend 4 hours filling out that paperwork if that's helpful to you. When working with a buyer, you just never know when a buyer is going to say like, yep, this is the house and I absolutely want it. So I recommend printing off some of these packets. Jessica will teach you how to do templates, which is really, really helpful in Instanet. And I recommend printing out a few of these packets and just keeping them in your work bag and having them ready and on hand in case someone surprises the heck out of you and says like, I can't live without this house and I need to buy it today. Otherwise, what happens most often, they'll love it, they'll want it. You'll notice that the seller has some sort of, maybe deadline as to when the offer has to be in, or they have maybe some sort of outline of what they want included in the offer. You will have the chance to go back to your computer and to work on it, but you'll probably find you're on some sort of real quick timeline. So you'll feel a little bit more pressure in saying like, oh my gosh, I've got to fill this out really quick and I need to make sure that I've done it accurately. So when creating your packets, be sure to read through every document a few times. Be sure to read through them, rehearse them, say them to your kids, say them to your mirror, do them in a way that you eventually get down the language of how to talk through this easily and properly. But we're going to start at square one and we are going to log on to the North Star MLS. If you haven't done your SPAR orientation yet, make it a priority. And then they will give you an ID number that you can use to log into the North Star MLS. You guys will probably find tips and tricks and shortcuts and ways for you to get to it real quickly. I always out of habit just do northstarmls.com. But the reason I'm doing it for you today is I want to bring to your attention, they have this nice resources tab. And on the resources, there is a training library. There's general information about all the forms here. And what really I think is most valuable to you is their rules and regulations. Keller Williams Preferred Realty is independently owned and operated, but we do have kind of a nice camaraderie and partnership with a couple other different Keller Williams offices. One of them that we partner with is the Keller Williams in Maple Grove. Greg Hartos is the name of the broker there. He serves in the same capacity that I do at an office on the North Metro. It's actually a little bit larger than our office. And every Thursday, he actually does a Zoom where you can just listen in and hear him talk through these documents in even more detail. He gives a lot of tips and tricks. I did post it on the PC coaching page on Saturday, so try to dig back and look at that and look for the link. If you're craving more education, it's a great thing. If you have time, it's a great thing. If you don't, and you fly by the seat of your pants like I often do, that's okay too. But I want to show it to you as a resource as well as this, which is a resource. You'll notice on the packet, I flipped it to the back page of this timeline expectations that we have here at our office. And this is an outline as to once you have an executed purchase agreement and how you handle that in listing opportunity, in buyer opportunities in command. And there are a couple hyperlinks here that go to these same rules and regulations. They also take you to some Keller Williams resources that we have. So when you see the blue underline there, what you're linking to is this here. And like I said, these are, the rules and regulations about the forms. All right, so going back to the main page, I just click on the matrix login. It'll take you here to be able to write in your username and password. And then once you've logged in, it brings you here to the My Matrix dashboard. Yafit and I spent some time together over the weekend showing her how I've done, saved carts, saved searches, added clients to my to the database here so that they can visit the portal. All of this is really, really helpful and things that I hope you spend time getting used to. In the meantime, we're going to go over here to external links where you go to the Minnesota Realtors forms, which is also called Transaction Desk. In Transaction Desk, you're going to see a few different options over here on the sidebar. And I always go to this home button here where it shows you all of your transactions. These are various different real estate clients, both listings and buyers that I've been working on over the past few weeks. And I'm going to go here into a folder, so to speak, or a transaction folder, pretending you guys in this boot camp are my actual buyer. So when I click on Buyer Bootcamp, it brings you to this dashboard, but what I like to use the most often is this button over here on the right called Forms, because that gives me a nice list that I can just go down in the forms, and you're less likely to forget them if you follow the order that we have in our templates. Any questions on how to get there? That was a refresher for some of you and new to others. Any specific questions? No? All right, I like it. So we'll just start here at the top. Whether you're representing a buyer or a seller, at first substantive contact with this person, with this consumer, you need to explain to them that as a realtor, you hold your license with the state of Minnesota. And with that license, you owe them fiduciary responsibilities, and you can represent them in a few different ways. This is something that I like to print off and keep also a handful of them in my work bag, because really, the first time you start talking with someone, you are in true technicalities you're supposed to go over it with them. It is a highly competitive market right now. This isn't a contract between you and them. This is truly just education. And if you can define yourself as a true professional by having gone over this with them before any other realtor that they come in contact with, I feel assured that they will remember this about you. They'll appreciate that you educated them. Now, maybe not those real, quick decision makers. They may find it a little bit annoying. So again, try to judge the personality type of your buyer. But to help you understand what the form is, this is agency relationships in real estate, and Minnesota law requires that early in any relationship that a real estate broker or salesperson discuss with the consumer what type of agency relationships exist and that they desire. The available options are listed below, and this is not a contract. This is just an agency disclosure only. If you desire representation, then you do a separate contract, which is the document that we'll do next. So I think that gives them real peace of mind. It kind of gets their ink rolling in their pen, and it kind of gets them thinking like, this is not a contract. This is just information. So you'll explain to them, every house that I show is represented by a seller's broker. So the seller of that home has contracted with a realtor and a real estate company to do a market analysis and set the price, define a marketing plan, put a for sale sign in the front yard, take professional photography, and list it for sale on the MLS. That realtor is representing just the seller and the seller's best interest. In the case of us today, as we're out shopping for homes, I'm representing you as just the buyer's broker. I'm recommending to you homes that seem to fit your needs. You're bringing me homes that you're interested in. We're putting them together on a tour, and I'm taking you out looking at houses today, but I don't have interest in the seller. My sole interest is in representing your best interest to help you get a house and get it at the price and terms that you want. However, if I happen to show you a home that's listed by Keller Williams Preferred Realty, which is our office here in Burnsville, we have roughly 200 realtors, that home seller would be represented by my brokerage, and you would be represented by me and my broker. So we've entered into what's called a dual agency relationship. I am not the realtor listing this home, but because my brokerage and my work colleague has it listed, it's considered dual agency, and you as the consumer deserve to be informed, and you also get to decide if you want to work in that situation. I can't give you legal advice, but I can say, now I'm talking to you in the class, I can say in my experience, very few people decline dual agency or say that they're not interested in dual agency, because the bottom line is, It's hard to get a house right now. They just want a house and they really don't care who it's listed by. The buyers often might also feel like you can give them a little competitive advantage because you are a dual agent working with someone at your office that you already have a good relationship with, that you know and trust and work well with. Sellers sometimes feel like dual agency is not a good thing, but most buyers tend to say like, oh, whatever, or actually that could work to my advantage. But remember, on this form, you're just explaining it to them. There are also situations right now, because homes are selling so quickly and homes are kind of selling, to their cousin and to the neighbors down the street's best friend. There are some situations coming up where real estate transactions are handled by a realtor acting as a facilitator. It is not as common, but it's becoming more common now in this market. And so you would just describe to them that as a facilitator, as it says in bold, I do not owe any parties any of these fiduciary responsibilities that I'm going to list to you down below. I'm essentially just executing the paperwork, but I'm not representing anyone's best interest. And then the buyer is going to say like, oh, no way, Jose. I want you in my court. Like, I want you as my advocate. I want you as a buyer's representative. Oh, perfect. Okay, I'm going to explain that form next. But before I do, I want to make sure that you understand that by law, we are required as realtors to give you these fiduciary responsibilities. And you might remember from your classes, they called it OLD CAR was the acronym. They're listed out here actually a little differently. I wish they were back in that order for ease of just talking through the script. But the fiduciary responsibilities that we owe to our buyer clients are loyalty. We need to do only what's in their best interest. We need to be obedient to them. So if they say, I want to make this offer at $50,000 under asking, and we say, well, that's not likely going to be accepted, but they insist, you must do that for them. You must be obedient to them. We must disclose all material facts that we might know about the property. We must be confidential, so we can't go sharing it with our best friend when we're out on that walk. We need to use reasonable care in performing the duties that they expect of us. So does that mean that you're in your middle of your son's baseball game and they want you to make an offer and you need to leave the baseball game to do it? No, but it does mean that if the offer deadline is that evening at 10 p.m., after you put your son to bed, you better start working on the offer. You need to use reasonable care to do the best that you can as the responsibilities as their agent. And then you also need to use good accounting. So this is becoming a little bit outdated because so many people are utilizing electronic funds transfer for the earnest money portion of a real estate contract. But if they give you a check, or if they gave you cash or a money order or something like that, you need to be very responsible about how you handle that money that they might give you. Then you also need to make sure and remind them that as realtors, we are committed to not discriminating against anyone or any protected class. But it's important to talk about the protected class of sexual offenders on this portion of the document. Don't skip over this. Let them know that as you're shopping for homes and I'm taking you to neighborhoods you've never been before, you might wonder to yourself, gosh, for the safety of my kids or my grandkids or my guests, are there any sexual predators who live in this community? And they may ask you as a realtor, hey, what do you know about who lives in this neighborhood? Or tell me about the church. You can't tell them any of that information because that would be discriminatory. They can do all that research on their own. And then you also need to let them know if they are worried about the location of sexual predators living in the communities that you might be shopping for houses together, they need to go to this Department of Corrections website, which is listed down here on the page. So if this were a really long document and you were preparing it to send out for signing, I would recommend that after every page or after every couple pages that you go up here to the file, you scroll down to save, and you go over to the save button. Because this is so short and we didn't input anything into it, we're not going to do that as often, but I'll show you how you do that on the purchase agreement. But just for the purpose of this form, you're going to go right down to save and exit. All right, so it sounds like you want me to represent you. That will be my sincere pleasure and honor. So you'll write in here today's date. You'll put in the date that you're going over the form with them. you'll write in their names here. It's not as important to have legal names. You can use short names if you want. It's always best to be as thorough as you possibly can. But if you're just getting to know them and you don't know if it's, you know, they call her Janie, but you don't know if it's Janice or Jan or, you know, whatever the long names are, you can just put the name that she's, you know, referencing herself as. It'll be auto-filled in here that the broker is Keller Williams Preferred Realty, who they have the buyer representation contract with, and you're acting on behalf of Keller Williams. And then you'll want to write in here, ideally today's date, because you're filling out this form as you're showing them any houses. You may have to back up the date a little bit if you're signing this buyer representation contract a day or two after you have actually shown them a house. And I'm not going to lie, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is going to happen occasionally. But to show that you have represented them in the proper timeline, put the date here that you started showing them houses. And then based on their personality type, you may be able to say, I'm representing you for a whole year. That's the most frequent that I see as I'm auditing files here at the Market Center. But if it's someone who is really analytical, who's pretty nervous, they're pretty skeptical, you may want to have a relatively short time frame for your buyer representation so that you can prove to them that you're doing a good job. Krista, you can walk through. It's casual. You may need to have it really short, but then you have to be watching that date so that you can extend it if they haven't found a house in that time frame. Essentially what this does is this is what protects you to be able to receive that commission a few months down the road when you finally are selling them a house. So the broker is going to make reasonable effort to help you find a property, and this form says that the buyer is agreeing that they will work exclusively with us as the brokerage. We are notifying them that we are being paid a commission for them purchasing this home. It's not paid for by them. It's paid for by the real estate company that represents the seller. The real estate company representing the seller then pays Keller Williams Preferred, and then Keller Williams Preferred has some sort of split arrangement with you and or your team, and you receive a smaller amount than that 2.7%. And I do take the time to explain that to buyers because I think it's commonly perceived that like, oh, we're so overpaid, but they have no idea how that money is all split up. So take your time to explain that to them. This does technically say, however, that they are responsible to pay you the commission if the seller does not. So read over this section. It gets a little tricky, especially if you're working with someone super analytical who's going to be reading these line by line and asking you questions about it. This line 41 here supersedes line 30, however, where it does clarify that the broker is authorized to negotiate with and receive compensation paid by sellers or brokers representing sellers. So I am letting you know that any compensation that I accept from a seller does or shall reduce any obligation of the buyer to pay this compensation amount listed above here. Does that make sense? Sort of-ish. It is really, really, really important from my auditing perspective, however, that you do write in a compensation amount there. I see some realtors write whatever, they literally just write the MLS commission. I prefer this to say 2.7%, which is why we have that entered in here. Then it's also important that the buyer recognizes, and it is a must that you disclose it here. It's actually against the code of ethics if you don't. You must write in that there is an additional commission received by the buyer's broker, and it is referred to commonly in our industry as kind of industry jargon. It's called the broker administrative fee. So if you worked for Chris Lindahl Real Estate, I think his broker admin fee is like $900. If you worked for, you know, Remax Advantage Plus, I think their broker administrative fee is like $500. So it really, really ranges. But I think where it originated is when you come to a closing, you'll see there's a fee paid to the title company. There's a fee paid to the appraiser. There's percentage taxes that are paid to the government. So there are all these kind of like less than $1,000 fees that are listed down to total their closing costs. And it was found by real estate companies that they could add in a fee there as well and justify it. So it's $3.99 here at the brokerage. It covers a lot of important and valuable services that we provide to you. So it's not a junk fee. It is actually providing for things, but we give you the authority to change that to whatever you want. So at closing, $3.99 will go to Keller Williams Preferred, but if you charge them $4.99 or $5.99 or $6.99, the difference goes to you. And what I found is some realtors utilize that to defray some of the monthly costs that they have here. So whether it be the tech fee or paying for your photocopies or whatever your fees you feel like are adding up, you can defray that by changing this to whatever broker compensation that you'd like. Any questions? Within reason, not whatever you'd like within reason. Oh, and I will mention, if you're working with a buyer who's doing a VA loan, we are not, as a kind and considerate thing from Keller Williams Preferred Realty, we waive that broker administrative fee to thank them for their service. So you should highlight that there for them and just be mindful of that. So this
is that only if they're doing the VA loan, or is that for any vet?
You know what I think it could be for any vet, actually. I should clarify that, but I do believe it's for any veteran. Yep. So going on to page 2 then, you're going to let them know, and again, you're going to go over this in detail or you're not, depending on their personality type, but you're going to let them know that you are representing them in this type of real estate transaction. So if you're out shopping with someone who only wants to buy farms or vacant land, you can just check those 2 things if you want to. If you know that this person is just buying one property and they're just buying it for their personal use, you can check just that box. We advise here that you check all the boxes just to cover all the bases. You never know if they're going to win the lottery and they're going to want to buy a commercial building in addition to their mansion, So just check all the boxes just to kind of cover your bases. But again, if they're a super analytical personality type, you maybe just want to be more specific to this real estate transaction. You then go on to describe to them that once you get this house and the mortgage is ready to close, you'll be closing at a title company. And I can, as a convenience to you, coordinate the closing with the title company if you grant me permission here by checking on line 66. And if not, you can also coordinate that closing on your own. Now, hardly anyone is going to check line 67 and say that they want to arrange on their own. They're paying us as a realtor to make this easy for them, right? But the people who tend to come up, they say like, oh my gosh, that's right. My aunt is a title closer. She talks about her work in title closing all the time. I really do want to do that on my own. So you need to make sure and discuss this with them at this section. Don't breeze over it, no matter the personality type. Discuss it with them. Let them check or tell you which box to check, and then initial on line 68. If the buyer ends up buying a home that is being sold by someone who is not a U.S. citizen, they're a foreign person, there are major tax implications if that seller does not pay the appropriate taxes. So it's more important really for you guys to just have a general concept of it. It's not as important on this document, but it's valuable, I think, to bring it up right now so that when you do need to bring it up on the purchase agreement and the seller's disclosure, that at least it's not the first time they've heard it, that it's something that they have, kind of breezed through already. They are entitled to conduct a private inspection on the home once they get it. They're entitled to place a warranty on the home once they get it if they wish. And then it goes on to describe here that agency relationship again. So you'll say to them, you recall when we went over the agency relationships form 2 weeks ago, that I talked about the possibility of me showing you a home that's listed by Keller Williams Preferred Realty. Well, we're now at the point where you would need to decide. Either you would allow me to show you properties listed by Keller Williams Preferred Realty, or you do not allow me to. And that's where you would check here either yes, they agree, or no, they do not agree. And again, it is so rare that anyone would say no. They do absolutely have to sign here. You'll find it a little bit different in the purchase agreement. And you, as the realtor, also need to sign here. Goes on to talk about what they would need to do if they were to terminate the contract, goes on to talk about if they had agency relationships with any other real estate brokerages in the past, talks about how this doesn't become a contract unless it's fully executed by both the buyer and you, the realtor, that electronic signatures are just as valid. And that they do consent to allow you to communicate with them using all these forms of communication that you're going to list out here. I see a lot of these buyer rep forms with just the buyer signature and sometimes even not the buyer's printed name. I do think it's best practice for you to write in their current property address, their phone number, and their email address here. It's safe and secure for us to have that alternate contact information here at the brokerage. It's also just a good way to make sure the information you have is correct, or if you don't have it, it's a good way to ask them, by the way, what is your cell phone number? We've only been communicating via email. So it gives you kind of a reason to hook in and get more information from them. Any questions on here? I realized actually, was that Nicole who was sitting here on Saturday? Anyway, she had a question about representation agreements after a contract has canceled. And I realized that was you.
Yeah.
Okay. Then Michelle. Then I realized that I totally skipped over it here when we were on page 1. But on line 34, I'll just take the time to read it. It says within 90 days, but not to exceed 6 months after the expiration of this contract, if the buyer purchases a property which either the broker or licensee representing the buyer has physically shown, in which the buyer has made an affirmative showing of interest before the expiration of this contract, as long as the broker identified the property on a written list that the broker gave to the buyer within 72 hours after the expiration of this contract, that you would be entitled to commission. So I breeze through that pretty quickly when I'm talking with buyers, because it's almost like you're getting the cart before the horse. It's almost like you're talking about a problem before the problem has arisen. However, that's why it's in here. So let's just say you show a house, you make an offer with your buyer to buy it. There's 25 offers and they don't get it. And then that was like the straw that broke the camel's back. And that buyer says, enough, this is chaos. I'm never going to get a house. This isn't the right time for me. I'm done with it. And they cancel the representation contract with you. Once they've canceled that representation contract with you, which isn't going to happen very often. So again, kind of cart before the horse, but you should email to them. These are all the houses that we looked at together, and you need to be reminded that my brokerage has a 6-month or a 3-month protective list. So if you are to buy that house after we've entered this contract, you as the buyer yourself, not as the future real estate company, you as the buyer yourself owe me this commission. Now, I've never seen a situation where this has come up and a buyer has paid out of pocket, but I'm sure it exists, which is why it is in here in the contract. But what might happen, like you're probably thinking to yourself, how could this ever play out? Well, what might happen is if your buyer who canceled the contract was like obsessively in love with that house and they wanted it so badly, they researched the address, they looked on Facebook, they found out if they had any common connections on Facebook. And then, a couple weeks later, the person who did get the house ended up their financing fell through or something like that. It pops back up on the MLS, or maybe it never pops back up on the MLS, but the buyer, reaches out to that realtor directly and says, like, I want this house. I'll pay $100,000 over asking. I'm going to get this house. That would be a situation where they'd be buying it after your representation contract has ended, and they technically still owe you the commission. You may lose. You may get a bad reputation. You may lose some goodwill.
We're tracking that down.
Yeah, but for whatever reason, if it works out that way, this is the clause of the contract that shows that you are indeed entitled to the property because you procured the cause and took them there on the first showing.
In my head, it was more like you're not getting along with the buyer. You can't come to see eye to eye.
Yeah.
So you decide to part ways mutually.
Yeah.
And then they turn around and they're like, okay, but I still want this house.
Yeah.
I just did all that work for you.
I know.
So.
I have, I say it's kind of like throwing paint on a wall. Like I have worked so hard for people who've never bought a house from me. And then the opposite can happen where you take someone out one time and they buy the first house they see. So it all kind of, the work evens itself out in the end,
Yeah.
but you are going to have a ton of situations where maybe it doesn't end bad,
Yeah.
they just don't buy anything and you feel like, holy smokes, I just put in 80 hours of work and I got paid zero. It's painful, but it's a part of it. It's a part of it. All right, so again, just to show you, you can save this along the way as you're filling in these blanks, or you can go down to save and exit. One thing that I think is really great about Keller Williams Preferred Realty is they have put together this form that's unique to our market center, and it's called the Keller Williams Preferred Realty Brokerage Additional Disclosures. I've not seen this before. I don't see it when I'm auditing other people's files. You do have to do it for both sellers and buyers. I didn't go over it with the seller. I don't think I went over it with the sellers on Saturday. It'll be a form that you'll kind of throw in there probably after the fact, but with buyers, it's really valuable information for them to have right away. Oh, I did go over it because it asked them about multiple offers. Yeah, I did go over it. All right. So you are educating your buyer now on just a few tidbits that Keller Williams has found they want you as the professional to be educating buyers and sellers on. So it's important that your buyer understands when they make an offer on a property, before the offer is actually submitted, they're going to want to have reviewed the seller's disclosure statement. Just make it put it on your to-do list and make it a little homework assignment to look up any listing and review the seller's disclosure statement so that you can see the types of things that are on there. But when you send these types of things out for electronic signatures, you don't really want to just send a buyer a disclosure and say, go ahead and sign this. You want to make sure they understand what they're signing. And it's a seller's thorough report of the time that they've lived there, what they've done to the house. Have they had mice in the basement? Have they had bats in the attic? Have they, has the refrigerator gone on the brink? A seller's disclosure statement is really important. And it is a requirement that the seller fill it out and that the buyer sign it in understanding. It is common that when a buyer makes an offer on a home, it's going to be contingent upon them conducting a home inspection. Now, this is just going to be literally a snippet in time, so it's not going to be this way forever. Some buyers are waiving their home inspection, which I highly, 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 highly recommend you do not do. I did it with one buyer roughly 5 years ago, and that buyer won't talk to me anymore because they're so upset with the condition of the house that they moved
Foundation
into.
probably was something major that happened.
Yeah. Who knows? She was a little bit nutty, but you get nutty when you start feeling like I just made this huge decision and I didn't have enough information.
They put up to X amount of money. They try to do that today. 5,000, 6,000. They try to put, something. To kind of protect them.
What's important for this form is they need to make sure and understand that a home inspection will have a home inspection contingency time frame. So they can they've got the house, they can take a deep breath, they can hire a home inspector to conduct the inspection. They'll get a nice, thorough written report. And then with that information, which is another point where it can feel very overwhelming because inspectors want to over-inform rather than under-inform to kind of cover their own A's, if you know what I mean. But they need to be informed and educated. This option exists. You have to pay for it on your own. Technically, the buyer is supposed to schedule it on their own, though we can give them some recommendations. So it's a step in the process that is going to equip them and educate them, but it also feels a little bit overwhelming. Likewise, there are certain warranty programs that buyers and sellers can utilize in their home transaction. We can give them recommendations on that. I can speak to them about my personal experience with it, but it is very much an optional item, having a home warranty. There may be cases, and right now there are very likely going to be cases where there are multiple offers made on a home. And as the buyer, you need to initial down here and you need to say that you understand it is the seller's choice to divulge that information. So if your buyer is frustrated with you because you're saying to them, you know, gosh, when we were at the house together, there were like 4 other parties that were trying to show the home. It's very likely that there's going to be multiple offers on this home, but the seller's realtor hasn't told me. So we just have to put our best foot forward in the offer that we write today, but the seller has not informed me if there are other offers or not. And this covers you right here. You may be looking at a home in a neighborhood where there's a community association. They are very diverse in how they are managed, governed, and financed. They differ greatly on the fees that they have and what's covered by the association. So we'll get you the information that the seller provides to us, but it is the buyer's responsibility to make sure and review all that and fully understand it. There may be the type of situation where a buyer is purchasing a home in what's called a 1031 exchange, which is a tax deferred situation. They have to work with a qualified, like I think they're called intermediary. So you'll know if you're working with a buyer doing a 1031 exchange. So I really just do breeze through that. It's also important to Keller Williams Preferred Realty that we make sure that our buyers and sellers are notified that we are highly trained in the field of real estate and marketing, but we are not experts in construction and building inspections. We're not experts in tax. We're not inspectors in, we're not experts in appraisals and things like that. So we'll give them information, but they may have to go further in depth and get information from other people. Again, going on to talk about some things that you can kind of breeze through based on the type of person that you're working with. But most importantly for a buyer, make sure that they understand that there will be terms in their purchase agreement of exactly when the seller has to be moved out of their home. It is most often on closing date, but not always. And that prior to closing, they are entitled to the right to be able to do a final walkthrough at the home. So most buyers will have a closing, say scheduled at 10 a.m., and then they'll go and conduct a final walkthrough at that new home at 8:30 or 9 o'clock, or maybe the night before, but they're entitled to a final walkthrough. Really important to me that you're putting the property address in here and you're writing your name on the bottom. I see that skipped a lot in auditing, but you absolutely have to have your buyer sign here. So we'll save this. This one we're going to breeze through pretty quickly. When a consumer is working with a company, if the owners of that company also have ownership interest in other companies which might be associated, the consumer deserves to be aware. So I just very simply explain this and I say Keller Williams Preferred Realty is actually owned by a group of people. It's a large group of people and I personally don't even know all of them. Olivia is one of the owners and she's the managing principal if you've met her along the way. She's here in the office every single day. But of that pool of owners, some of those people also have small ownership interest in Minnesota Title, a title company that we could close at, New American Funding, a mortgage company that you might consider doing your home loan with, or Keller Mortgage, a mortgage company which you might consider doing your loan with as well. It says in bold, you are not required to use any of these service providers. So this is truly just education. This is not a contract. All right, so all of that is agency relationships, types of things. Now we're gonna get to the nuts and bolts of how to fill out a purchase agreement and what you need to do with it. But before we do, does anyone wanna take a break? Yeah, a comfort break, we'll call it today. Use the ladies' room, grab something to drink. I'm just gonna go to my office across the hall and get my water. Anyone wanna see where I am when you stop by with your first purchase agreement in my Blizzard?
I know where you are.
It's just right over here. You're welcome. I'm in the office every day from 9:30 till 2:30, and except for Thursdays where I actually audit files from home. And you're welcome to call me on the phone anytime, which is why I left my business cards there. And if you pass by my office when you're here, stop it. I'm here for you.
Yeah.
I'm so very excited. Thank you. Beautiful. I really want some of this.
Which was in the air force.
Yeah, sure.
Oh my goodness. That's a lot. Are you gonna work every day or do you still enjoy it? Well, I How do you feel it's going? Is this boring you or overwhelming you? I know.
It's scary because you're like, oh my gosh. Like I'm excited, but I'm like, am I gonna be able to do all this?
You are.
That's the scary part.
I
And I
know.
want to be good. I know it takes time, but I just take it one day at a time.
One day.
Yesterday we did so we did the showings. It was really good. And then
Good. Who did you show with? Was it?
and I'm not sure showing like we went to open.
Oh yes, as the PC group. Yes.
And then after that, we did the measurements. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Measure like I know he explained everything, but if I found myself in that situation where I have to measure,
Right.
measure like an apartment. I'm like,
I know. Well, let me show you this. This might make you feel a little bit better. My matrix, my pending listings. So I have a house that closes next week that I listed for sale. And it was built in 1978. And there was no record on the MLS of it having sold prior to my client selling it. If there were, I would use those measurements and I would just copy them identically. But since there weren't, I did measure, but I was not super detailed, but I always put this clause in. All measurements are approximate, buyer and buyer's agent to verify.
so you measure it, and then that means that if it's not exact, then you are protected.
Yes. Yeah. So give yourself a little break and utilize that. Where's your apartment? Where do you live now? Oh, okay. How long have you lived there? Oh, wow. You have an 8-year-old son?
I have a 23, 16, and 8.
Wow. Are they all boys? Well, I have 2 girls.
How old?
They are 11 and 7. Yeah.
So how do you do with your kids if you're so busy with the, is it hard?
It's very hard. Yes, it is very hard. We have a nanny. Yeah, we have a nanny. But I took this job as the broker for the set hours because I was feeling spread thin with the responsibility for my kids. It's definitely a balance, but then you also are wide open during a lot of the days. So we have such flexibility. Really is very flexible overall.
North Minneapolis.
Oh, man. That's gonna be rough.
It's fun. Busy.
We were just talking about kids. Do you guys have children? Okay, so you have 2 kids. How old are they?
18 and 14.
2 boys. You have an 18-year-old? You look like you're 18.
I turned 40 yesterday.
Happy birthday. Oh my gosh, the big 40. Midlife. Hold on for the midlife crisis.
Yeah, these reading glasses that I have to have with me everywhere I go. I've been holding out for like 6 months. I'm getting glasses, but like not on 40. No.
Yes.
I gave in like 2 months ago.
Oh, that's so funny. I have been needing glasses for a couple years as well too, and I literally just ordered mine like 2 weeks ago. No, 2 days ago, I mean.
It's rough.
Yeah.
So boys yesterday from school and we went
Oh.
to tactical urban combat at the mall
Fun.
and played.
You're a really good mom.
Oh, we love laser tag. It's like one of our favorites.
Fun.
And they allow running at that arena. Most laser tag places don't allow running. And so.
Oh my gosh.
we did laser tag and Nerf gun wars.
Oh my gosh, so fun.
So much fun.
Did they take it easy on you because it was your birthday?
No.
No?
No.
They didn't just
I'm a
let you
very
in?
competitive family. Very competitive.
Oh, that is so fun. Did they take you out to eat after?
No, we went to Pancake House for breakfast before.
Ooh,
we went.
yum.
Yeah, but we usually just do, somebody gets, birthday person gets dinners.
Fun. What'd you
My mom
pick?
was with us, and so I was just like, okay, well, my mom's making her blueberry pancakes. They're the best.
Oh, delicious. Does she use fresh blueberries or like,
Fresh.
yum, that sounds awesome.
Yeah. She had a comment, she's like, how do we have enough blueberries? I'm like, well, I have blueberry pie filling here. She's like, it's just a Paul.
Not gonna work. Well, you know how when you make blueberry muffins and they come in that little can, Well, maybe there's such a thing for pancakes. What'd you guys learn in your orientation?
We basically just went over all the training that we have to do. Our little
Checklist,
checklist.
Yep, good.
So,
We have really good trainings and education and systems here. You'll feel so supported, so much more than most other places.
so what's the difference between like KW Preferred, Select, and Integrity?
They're all really identical. They just are owned by different people, managed by different leadership teams. And then of course, just in different locations. Most people choose a real estate brokerage because they know someone there or because it's close to their house.
Okay, so it's just basically just a different branch, so that's why it's named different.
Exactly. As opposed to Edina Realty, where if you joined Edina Realty, you'd be at one office, but then you could kind of go to all of them if you needed to. You could, drive to them and do meetings at them if you needed to. You could probably do the same here, but it's not owned by one entity like Edina Realty is. Yeah. Okay. I think I'm gonna get back at it. Like, how do I get back over, since this is up here? Can I drag it down? Oh yeah, here we go. All right. I'm gonna get back at it. I didn't give a time frame, so I'm just going for it. When showing a house, you learned in your real estate classes that there are some things that are real estate and there are other things that are personal property. Take advantage of the Keller Williams Preferred Realty personal property agreement form. And I think it's a good idea to even have it printed out and have it, sorry, I didn't give a end time for it, so.
Sorry,
I know, you're a talker.
Yep.
Ah, you're so fast. You're gonna get a speeding ticket from Cody. Keller Williams has a personal property agreement in their templates that I highly recommend you use. And you may even, as you get started, want to start out printing this off and just carrying it on your clipboard when you go into houses showing them, because one of the most embarrassing things is getting to that closing walkthrough and having the buyer say like, oh my gosh, like I thought those floating shelves were gonna stay, or I thought, oh my gosh, I thought that shelving in the garage was gonna stay, and now I'm like freaking out because it's not here anymore. So make sure and be very, very clear and specific about what personal property is going to be transferred on the day of closing.
We do an open house with someone else.
Mhm.
We're not sure, so we look at the MLS comments,
Yep.
but it's not, they don't say that there, right? So how do I know what's you know, what they're gonna leave, what they're taking.
I would say in your offer, write down everything that they want. And then that will give the seller the chance to comment back and say, absolutely not. I am not allowing you to have that.
Well, what happened on this weekend is that we were doing somebody else's showing.
Yeah.
And it seemed like other people knew more about what was staying than what, so we didn't have the information of like, oh, none of those
Oh.
workbenches are staying. We
Oh,
learned from somebody else. So,
Oh.
but we couldn't find that information.
sure. Well, when doing an open house, I would say pull back on your real estate classes that you took and say, if it is not bolted to the wall, it is not staying. So anything freestanding in the garage would not be going, any of the freestanding staying, any of the freestanding shelves in the mechanical room would not be staying. Any, you know, the TVs and the TV brackets, that gets to be all a little bit tricky, which is why this form is so important.
We just stuck with everything's negotiable.
Perfect. That's absolutely the perfect response. And that's the perfect response, because what the seller says is going to stay or go today might be different than how they feel tomorrow. So until it's documented in writing, it is negotiable. So use this form to its fullest. And I recommend doing that before you actually even do the purchase agreement, because then that just gets it out of the way. All right, so here we go. Here's the big one. We'll probably spend, I'm guessing, maybe about a half hour on it. So buckle up. Try not to let your eyes glaze over. It's an important document. Just take a lot of notes to keep yourself busy. So you're going to write the date that you're writing up the purchase agreement, and most likely it'll be the same date that you're making your offer. You'll write the buyer's names on here. Now, this is a little bit different than that buyer representation contract, because this does go to the title company. This does go to the mortgage company. This is what's going to use to generate their mortgage documents and their title documents. So at this point, you are going to want to know their legal names. If their name is like mine and hers, Melissa Johnson, that was her birth name. And now she shortened it to Molly, and she's
I
married.
extended it nice, so they're all in there.
Good point. Good point. Good point. Good point. I forgot about that. You're going to want to make sure and put the middle initial in if there's, you know, if it's a common name like Tom Smith or Melissa Johnson or things like that. You're going to let the buyer know that earnest money is a portion of their down payment. It is a small portion of their down payment that you are going to give to the real estate company representing the seller, and you give it to take it out of your checking account, to hand it over and give control of it to the seller, to show your skin in the game, to show your vested interest. Like, I am so vested in wanting to buy this house that I'm willing to give you. And usually earnest money is roughly 1% of the sales price. So if they're buying a $200,000 townhome, you'd probably put in $2,000. Now, if you really want this house and you know there's multiple offers, the more earnest money you can give, the better. It shows more strength. There's some realtors who would argue and debate that earnest money means nothing because it really almost always gets refunded back to the buyer and it doesn't work to the advantage of the seller. And we don't need to get into that for now. For the purposes of today and representing your first buyer, just let them know the more they want the house, the more earnest money they should put in, but then it goes out of their control. It literally gets taken out of their bank account and put into the account of the seller's real estate company's trust account. However, it doesn't get put in there until the purchase agreement is executed. So until they find out that they are indeed the ones who got the house, then right away you'll give that check to the real estate company, or you'll send them a link where they can use their electronic banking and they can send it through something called trust funds. You're letting them know that it is going to be delivered to the listing broker, or if some strange situation, it needs to go directly to the title company, or maybe it goes to an attorney or something like that. But you'll see that it's standard here that it is delivered to the real estate brokerage no later than 2 business days after the date of final acceptance of this purchase agreement. The said earnest money is in partial payment for the purchase of this property. You're going to write in the address, the city, and the county. You're going to write in the zip code, and you're also going to put in the legal description, which is going to be on the listing. Where do we have it here? It auto fills in. Actually, I'm just going to show you this right now. So if they were going to buy this house and you utilized you utilized the function of being able to start your transaction record from here. When you click on this, it'll take you to a wizard and it will automatically fill in a lot of these parts and pieces. And learning how to do that and learning how to create templates for these contracts is a separate class that Jessica will teach you, and it's really, really, really valuable. It goes on to say that said purchase of this property shall include all these improvements, fixtures, and appurtenances on the property, including but not limited to this. So it goes on to describe a ton of stuff, even if it's a built-in dishwasher, built-in refrigerator, built-in beverage refrigerator, intercom, speaker, pool and spa equipment, propane tanks, so on and so forth. If there's anything else that's just a small amount, like 1 or 2 things, you can list it on here. Otherwise, I really do like you to use that personal property addendum. And it's helpful to talk about that first before you get to this section, so that you can just cover it by saying all the items we put on the previous form and all of these listed here are going to be included in yours on the date that you move in. If there is anything that they don't want in the purchase, so when Molly sold her house, I remember there was like some landscaping materials that were on the side of the house. It could have been the possibility, you know, like anyone should have been able to utilize that and take advantage of it, but it could have been the possibility that the buyer of her house wrote in here, and I don't want those retaining wall bricks. So that's where you would make it clear that something that you've seen on the property, you want to have removed from the property. You'll let them know the sales price of the house that you're making the offer at. So let's just call it $200,000. And you'll also then, this is a document that's going to notify the seller you're making an offer. It's also a document that notifies the title company and the mortgage company. So it's important to put in here, are they putting 3.5% down on their first home? Are they putting 0 down because they're a veteran, or because it's a home in a rural area where they have a special program for that? Are they putting 50% down? Are they putting 100% down? Maybe they're buying it in 100% cash, but you need to allocate here. Usually it's the down payment and then the mortgage financing. This is very rare where they would assume the seller's current mortgage, except in your case that you just described. And it's also very rare that they might do a contract for deed, but those are the 3 types of financing: mortgage financing, assuming, contract for deed, and then just the cash purchase. You'd write in here the closing date. We want to see an actual date, not on or before, which I even get in the habit sometimes of including that. The property address will be reiterated and the date will be reiterated on the top of every page. And again, that auto fills in for you, which is really nice.
The closing date, do you just kind of go by what's convenient for the buyer, or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So before you can actually get to a closing, you're negotiating on this contract, you're likely conducting a home inspection. And then once the home inspection has passed and you decide to proceed forward, then you need to do a whole bunch of work with the mortgage company. And mortgage companies, I'd say, are taking a minimum of 30 days, maybe even 45 days. So unless it is 100% cash purchase, it's most likely that if you were making an offer on a house today, let's call it May 1st, the soonest you'd be able to close it is roughly June 15th, probably more like June 30th. So give yourself an extended closing date out between 30 and 60 days. Really, the sooner you close a house, the better. Because if you were to say like, oh, I'm making an offer on May 1st, but we don't want to close on it until September 1st, it's really risky. Like someone could get in a car accident, someone could lose their job. The simply changing your mind by cold feet is a little bit off the table, but there's just realistic things that could happen. So in the interest of executing an offer that you're putting out there, and in the interest of earning the commission that you've worked really hard for, I do highly recommend that you have the closing date, ideally like 45 days out, 60 days probably, so you're not as rushed, and anything after that is a little bit risky. You'll, before you make an offer on a house though, you'll want to try to reach the seller's realtor. A lot of them are super busy right now because they're just getting so much interested in the few listings that exist. So you'll want to ask them if their seller has an ideal closing date. There might be a date that works for them based on where they're moving next. I would also say too, just kind of a pro tip, houses tend to close at the end of the month. It's a little kind of quirky thing about, you know, like prepaying the interest and stuff on the loans. So don't worry about that, but you'll find closings are really, really heavy. Mortgage companies and title companies are super busy. Therefore, they're not giving probably their best service because they're spread so thin if you close at the end of a month. So if possible, try to choose a closing date that's like around the middle of the month, because the first week of the month, those title companies are like, whew, I get to chill out a little bit. And then the middle of the month, they're back to the work. The end of the month, it's crazy. I also recommend, if at all possible, don't close on a Monday, because it's that like people don't always have it all together on Mondays, you know? And then also avoid closing on a Friday, because if for some reason your closing doesn't take place that Friday, then the first closing opportunity that they have, where your buyer needs to pack up all their stuff and figure out, you know, where to place it, where to live temporarily, is the following Monday. But if you're to close on like a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, if it gets pushed by a day, you know, you can usually figure out something for a night. Does that make sense? Try to close mid-month and Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yeah, it'll alleviate some of your stress. I'm really glad you asked that, Molly. Thank you. All right, so you'll see the rest of the purchase agreement then is broken out into these key chunks that are bold and capital. So mortgage financing is here. Then it goes down to seller contributes to closing costs and inspections. So this is talking just about mortgages up here at the beginning. You're going to say that this purchase agreement, and let's just assume 99% of the people you work with are indeed going to get a mortgage. So you're going to say on line 52, this purchase agreement is indeed subject to the mortgage financing contingency provisions below. You're saying that they are going to be getting a first mortgage. Some people will do like a 5% down mortgage. Then they'll also take a second mortgage for 15% so that they can get to that 20% down so they don't have mortgage insurance. And then the 80% then is totally financed. So they would have 2 mortgage payments technically, but they wouldn't have mortgage insurance. So that would be where they'd have first mortgage and subordinate financing. But again, 99% of the time in today's current market, you're going to say that they're taking a first mortgage and that they likely do not include any sort of grant or bond program or loan assistance. If they do, you need to specify it here. So that would be like if the county that they're buying in offers any down payment assistance. There's a realtor in this office who's working very closely with Habitat for Humanity, where Habitat for Humanity offers financing and some down payment assistance. So when you come upon those people that really want to buy a house, but they are just squeaking by to make it affordable, help them in researching to see if there's any grant programs. They're rare, they're very hard to come by. So it's not likely that you will say does, but if they do, you'll need to notify the seller, the mortgage, and the title company of that here in the purchase agreement. You're letting them know that though your buyer wants to buy this house, the purchase of it is indeed contingent upon them applying for and securing a mortgage. So you'll let them know that it's either a conventional loan, a veterans, a DVA loan, a first-time homebuyer FHA loan, or a USDA rural development loan. We actually see a lot of those here in this office because they draw this kind of perimeter around the Twin Cities area, and they call outlying areas, like even areas such as south and west of here, like down in Lonsdale and some of those smaller communities that are more rural down there. Your customers can buy houses for 0% down with the USDA rural development loan. And that's to encourage home ownership in those outlying areas. You're going to say that this mortgage is going to be amortized over a period of not any more than, it'll most likely be a 30-year mortgage. So you'll type that in here. And if it is like a 15-year mortgage or maybe a 20-year loan, you'll want to write that in there mainly so that the seller sees that. That is that's showing that your buyer has strong financial ability, and that could offer you an advantage. So you definitely want to write that in there, but most often it's just going to be 30 years. And then as you're writing this, remember, you're the buyer's representative. You're protecting the buyer. You're going to use this blank to that advantage, and you're going to say that the interest rate shall not exceed, let's just call it 4%. It's probably going to be less than that, but what you want to do to protect your buyers, you want to say, hey, if interest rates spike to 7%, that makes the mortgage payment on the same house double. for my client, and they can't afford a double what this mortgage payment is. So this is a protection clause for your buyer right here. You're letting them know that either you are going to allow their earnest money to be refunded based on financing all the way up until closing, or you're going to set a date where their mortgage financing is going to be that their earnest money is going to be refundable based on their financing. So let me tell you this. In a competitive market, the seller is going to want you to check box 78 right here. The seller is going to want to have you say, we are going to work fast and furious to get this mortgage ready, written, underwritten, and fully approved by this date. And then after this date, we're literally just waiting until closing. If we back out for any reason, we're forgoing all the earnest money. But to truly protect the best interest of your buyer, you're probably going to be more inclined to check this box here, because this gives them more time to make their decisions and to get all of their financing in line. And you're going to say that you want it to be refunded to buyer. If you do that on your first couple of offers, and there's multiple offers, you'll probably find that it's not going to fly. And then you and your buyer are going to talk together about why this is going to be one of those reasons. And eventually your buyer will warm up to the reality that in a competitive seller's market, they're going to have to check line 78. Does that make sense? I know you'll have a lot of questions about like, what is this written statement? But for the purpose of today, just know you have to check either or. And to show strength as a buyer, you would check line 78. To protect your buyer, you check line 72. You go on to say that the mortgage interest rate can be locked by the buyer and the buyer's lender at any time prior to closing. And then the mortgage company is going to send out an appraiser. Now, we talked about home inspectors and how I highly recommend that your buyers do a home inspection. That's an elected item. Having a home appraiser come out is a totally different type of person. It's someone who is hired by and technically works for the bank. They go into the house to make sure it is safe and secure, but really what they're going in is to make sure that their bank isn't over borrowing on something that isn't truly worth what the contract sales price is. So it's important for you to understand that differentiation, the appraiser versus the inspector. And it's important for your customer to understand that as well. The appraiser is going to come back with what the appraised value is, and it might be lower than what they're buying the house for. In most situations, it's the exact same sales price as what the appraiser sees here is the contract sales price, but it might be lower. Sometimes it's higher, it might be lower. And that's more, kind of hurdles and things for you and your buyer to talk about. But for the purpose of today, that appraiser, especially if it's USDA, VA, or FHA, may say like, hey, I'm worried. There is no stair railing at the back door. Or, hey, I'm noticing that there's some soffit and fascia that is falling down. There's not enough head clearance. There doesn't seem to be a back fan here that's actually moving air. They're going to call things out for the health and safety of the US citizens that they're giving these loans for on VA, FHA, and USDA. And they're going to ask the seller to make the house safe. And they're going to call it a lender required work order. So you're representing the buyer. The buyer chooses a mortgage company. The buyer gets a lender, and the lender says, I'm not going to give this loan, therefore you can't sell your house, Mr. Seller, until this work is done. Well, the seller is going to say like, why is that my problem? And the buyer's going to say, but I'm not putting money into this house to make these repairs before I own it. That would be crazy. That would be like throwing money in a slot machine. So the purpose of this article is to have the buyer and seller have agreed ahead of time how they're going to handle this problem should the problem arise. So you're going to write in here a number that's likely $1,000. Now it's kind of tricky for me to talk through some of this to you guys because a lot of this in today's market, you're going to have to pull out. You're going to have to put a zero in there. But I'm trying to describe it to you for the long-term vision of your career where it's not always like this. It's in the buyer's best interest to put a dollar amount in there, usually like 500 or 1,000, that they're going to ask the seller to spend if the buyer's mortgage company requires them to do some repairs. If the seller balks at this, say, okay, fine, I won't buy your house for $200,000 then, I'll buy your house for $201,000 then. but I just need to be assured that I'm not going to have to put any money into this house before I own it. Does that make sense? It's also important for you to know, and I always check line 127, but it's important for you to know, and it's important to inform your buyers who have these VA, FHA, and USDA loans, that if there is some work that they require the seller do before closing, the appraiser comes back out to do a re-inspection of the property. Well, they don't just do that for free, like buy one, get one free. They make you pay for their time to go back there, and it's called a re-inspection fee, and it'll be listed on their closing settlement statement as an additional fee that they have to do the loan. Make
From the
sense?
buyer's perspective.
From the buyer's perspective. I mean, you could tell the seller your house is junky and we had to come back, and so we're going to charge you for it, but that rarely flies even when it's not a seller's market. So you'll do that. If the buyer is utilizing FHA financing, you need to have this as a loophole to protect them, that if the house does not appraise for what we've contracted to buy it, so you'd write the contract sales price here again on line 133. This is a protection. We're seeing fewer and fewer FHA loans. I think in part because of that reason. FHA requires you put 3.5% down, but conventional loans are just 5%. So for another 1.5%, you're a little bit better off as a buyer to go with a conventional loan rather than an FHA, which has some of these tricks and challenges.
But they could, the buyer can pay out of pocket if it appraised for less.
Oh, yes.
So there's no problem with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a whole nother class. But yes, you are correct. If they are utilizing a VA loan, there's something called a funding fee, and you need to make sure and utilize lines 143 through 157 of this purchase agreement, and you need to utilize it with the mortgage company. I can't tell you any necessarily standards in here. It's something that before you write up the offer, you'll want to talk directly with their loan officer if they're doing a VA loan, and you'll say, what exactly should I write in these lines? It is a convenience to buyers to have sellers pay their closing costs. Has anyone heard this terminology or heard this jargon or experienced it themselves? What it is the closing costs are the expenses that you have related to a mortgage. It's the origination fee that you pay to the mortgage company. It's the broker administrative fee of $3.99 that you pay to Keller Williams Preferred Realty. It's the fee paid to the appraiser. It's fees like going down the list. Those are usually roughly 3% of the sales price of the home. So I'll write a 3% in here. And let's use that $200,000 house that we're buying as an example. You can expect as a buyer that you're putting down 5% on your conventional loan, but you also have to bring to closing the 3% closing costs, which is an additional $6,000. Well, a lot of people find it important to keep cash in their bank account, no matter how much cash they have saved, whether they have a very small amount because it's their first home or they have $1 million. A lot of people say, like, I just want to keep my cash right here safe in my savings account. I don't necessarily want to have it tied up in the property. So you would say, I want you, the seller, to pay my closing costs. Well, when it wasn't a seller's market, sellers would have to sort of hem and haw and say, like, okay, fine, I agree to pay that $6,000. I'll just make $6,000 less for my house. But what's happening right now is you would say, I'm going to buy the house for $206,000. That means that $6,000 isn't going to go to the seller. It's just going to funnel right through to my closing costs. But what's nice about writing it at $206,000 is your buyer doesn't have to bring $6,000 to closing, and it just essentially gets financed in. So they're paying a little bit higher monthly mortgage because they're wrapping the $6,000 in. But that is the differentiation to either, yes, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, we are asking you, or not asking you to pay our closing costs. Make sense? You are also going to tell Mr. and Mrs. Seller that you are either electing to conduct a home inspection or you are declining a home inspection. Remember, what does Melissa, the broker, want you to have all of your buyers do? Have a home inspection. You may not be able to. We may have to help you with some real tricky things in this competitive market out there. But to truly protect your buyers, you want them to elect to have a home inspection. You say that the purchase of this home is contingent upon an inspection that the property is, or that the buyer is going to hire and pay for on their own. You're going to tell the seller that you do not agree to do any intrusive testing. Literally in my 20 years, I've never had to do intrusive testing, but what that would be is like taking down a piece of sheetrock and looking underneath it, or, you know, digging out in the front yard to see what the foundation looks like at the front step. It is most likely that you are not going to conduct any intrusive testing. You're also going to tell them, and I'm calling this to your attention because it folds over onto this next page in a perfect way that you can just way too easily forget it. So remember on inspection to always go to the next page, and then you're telling the seller the time frame in which you're going to conduct the inspection and all negotiations then that may result from the home inspection. It's most commonly seen that you would do it within 10 days. So that gives you usually like 2 weekends if you're making the offer on Friday. But you want to give yourself usually at least 1 full business week to find an inspector who's available, schedule with the inspector, get the report the next day, and then do the negotiating that you need. If you're doing an inspection, but the seller really doesn't want you to, you could shorten that down to like 3 days. And then you would do what's commonly referred to right now as just a pass or fail inspection, where you're saying like, hey, I really want to protect my buyers. They need to at least get an inspection report and have the written report from the property inspector on it. But if we see anything that day that causes us to feel very concerned about the quality of this home, we'll cancel right that day. We won't go back and forth negotiating, asking you to hire an electrician for this, bring in a plumber for that, replace this window, fix that, this, that, and the other thing. We'll either say, yep, we're buying it with no inspection request, or no, we're not buying it altogether. But don't forget these days right here. If there's any other inspection items that you want to have done there, like if you want to inspect the well, if you want to inspect, do a radon test or something like that, you would list that out in here. And then you will go on to this next bolded section that talks about the protection of the buyer's contingency if they have a home to sell. Again, talking about your long-term career in real estate, you're going to come upon this quite a bit. But right now, most people are having to say that they are not contingent upon the sale of any other home. If you were to check line 1, there would be an addendum that you would add on to your offer. If you were to check line 2, that means that your buyer's home is already under contract and you're just waiting for their buyer to do all the financing and whatnot to get it to closing. You're also letting the seller know how you want to handle real estate taxes, because I think as you guys learned in real estate taxes, they're actually paid to the county twice per year. And so you're letting the seller know, most common, that the property taxes are going to be prorated for the buyer or seller. Or if you want to sweeten the deal, you could say to the seller, hey, I'm willing to pay all of your real estate taxes for this year if it helps them with their bottom line. You can also divide it out in months. Thanks for coming. Keep in touch. I know this is overwhelming, but we're here to help you. Yeah. All or none of the property taxes, so on and so forth. This is really important though. You'll want to look at the real estate listing where it goes down to talk about if there are any known special assessments, or maybe it's in the tax section. Oh, here we go. You'll look on a listing and you'll look at the property tax information and you'll see that the property taxes on this house are $4,356. They would tell you if there were any special assessments. They would also have to tell you if there are any special assessments that are pending. So you would then go in here and bring that forward, and you're going to say to the seller, hey, I want you to pay any real estate taxes that you haven't. I want you to pay any special assessments. I want you to pay any pending special assessments. And if there are cases where your buyer says like, hey, I know that assessment for street repair is coming up, I'm willing to take that on, that's where you would go out of the norm and you would check that the buyer shall assume those things. You also go down here utilizing this where either they know or don't know if there are any special assessments, and say that the seller represents that they either have or have not received any notice about special assessments. Let's just say you're making offers fast and furious for a buyer, and you made an offer on a purchase agreement and it was contingent upon home inspection. It was a pass-fail home inspection, and then you found in that inspection they didn't want to proceed forward, but the very afternoon that they decided that, part of their decision was fueled because a new house came on the market in the same neighborhood that they really, really wanted to be, you can draft up a purchase agreement to buy that other house, even though they're under contract to buy the first house that's falling through. But you need to disclose to the seller that this purchase agreement is subject to the cancellation of the previously written purchase agreement 2 days ago, and that you're saying you'll get the cancellation from that seller no later than a certain date. It is most likely that you're just going to say this purchase agreement is not subject. You'll also, this is more so for the purpose of the mortgage company and the title company than for the buyer. You'll also want to check in here whether they are going to get a, let's see here, whether they are going to get a warranty deed, which is the most typical deed, or if they're going to get something like a personal's representative's deed or a trustee's deed if it's being sold like on behalf of a deceased person or a foreclosure. That's where you see that. Really important here on line 271, you're going to let the seller know that you want to receive, your buyers want to receive possession of the property immediately, or, which is really the best case scenario, or you're going to let them know that you agree to take possession of the property. Maybe it's 24 hours later, 12 hours later, 48 hours later. If I were a seller and I was worried about closing and moving into a new house or, all the logistics that are going on that day, it would give me so much peace of mind to know that my buyer who's living in an apartment is willing to come to closing, put the mortgage together, the funds are going to be in my bank account, and then I can actually move out the next day. If it's any longer than like, say, 1 or 2 or 3 days, there's a form that we'll go over that talks about the seller rent back, where the buyer can own the home, but the seller can stay there renting it back from them. This would be just if you agree to give them just a couple more days after closing. This also is a section where your buyer acknowledges, and the seller does as well, that they agree to remove all debris and personal property not included here by the possession date. So back to Molly's case, the landscaping blocks, if Molly didn't remove those and it was asked of her to do it, this would be a case where it's essentially stating that your buyer now has possession or the trouble to handle those things. So the buyer has to dispose of if there's things that are left in the house that they don't want, or they become their property, they get to utilize them. Talking here through a bunch of things that I highly recommend you read through, but I don't need to go through to educate you. You're going to be much better off educating yourself by reading through all of this. A lot of this is rare and unlikely to occur. When I'm talking through it with most personality types, I will highlight like 1 or 2 things on each page and I'll just talk through them briefly so that they don't think I'm like not educating them at all. So I'll say things like, if it is termed in the contract that we are identifying business days versus calendar days, it outlines here that business days do not include Saturdays, Sundays, or state or federal holidays, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Again, it talks about the sexual predator information, and then it goes on to remind the buyer that they do have a right to do a walkthrough inspection prior to closing, either the day before or the day of, to establish that it is in the same condition that it was on the date that you made this purchase agreement, so they didn't like break the railing when their movers were moving the couch out and things like that. And you're also, please, please, please check this. I'm seeing a lot in audits. You're also saying that the buyer has either received a property seller's disclosure statement, or they received a seller's disclosure alternative, which is an optional, but you'll see this most often. If they haven't received either, it is best practice to go all the way down here to this other section and say, at the date of this offer, buyer has not received any seller's disclosure statement, just to make it really, really, really clear and concise. Otherwise, you're saying they've received one or the other. If the house happens to have a well or a septic system, you would have to check here that the seller does know of a well or septic system. Otherwise, you're most likely going to be clicking to say, yes, it is city water and sewer, and that we do not know of a well or a septic system, and therefore it is not subject to the addendum to the purchase agreement saying that you need to look at the disclosures for the well and septic system. This section, you're saying whether or not the buyer would like to have a home warranty on the house. I would say most buyers are not. I like to present it in a way that I say, so when was the last time you guys bought a TV? And they'll be like, whoa, out of left field, what are you talking about? And I'll say, oh, okay, last month, cool. I'll bet it's really nice. Or 2 years ago. Well, when you bought it, when you checked out, they usually say like, hey, would you like this optional warranty program on the TV? And they'll be like, oh yeah, I remember. That's so annoying. That's such a racket. I never get the warranty. Or they'll say like, oh, absolutely. I love that warranty. Like I wouldn't buy a major purchase without it. And then you would say, well, interesting. When buying a house, you actually have the option to purchase a home warranty on it as well. I can get you information on that. We can ask the seller to obtain it and pay for it for you, or it's something that you can pay for as a part of your closing costs. You can also even just purchase it on your home after the fact. Are any of those, do they give you peace of mind? Are they of interest to you? And then they'll say something like, oh, this house was just built 5 years ago. I don't think there's any sense in having a warranty, even though I'm normally a warranty person. Or maybe they'd say, this house has been a rental property for 15 years. It was built in 1910. I am like so worried about the furnace breaking, the first winter that I lived there. And then you'd say, well, then you know what? I think this probably is a good situation where I do educate you on the warranty providers that Keller Williams Preferred really likes. And why don't we just, it's a competitive seller's market. Why don't we just notify the seller that we're going to place a warranty on the home, but we're going to do it on our own. We're going to pay for it on our own. And you would just check all the appropriate boxes here. You would say, you would list the real estate licensee's name who has this house listed and their real estate company. And you would say they are the seller's broker. It auto fills in your name and your real estate company down here as the buyer's broker. But you have to remember, if it is a dual agency situation, you have to check that accordingly. You also have to check here that either dual agency does or does not apply. If it does apply, all sellers and all buyers have to sign it. If it doesn't apply, you can literally just check does not apply and you don't have to do any of the signings there. Again, more of these kind of, I try to, explain like maybe one more thing on here, definitely one more thing on this last page. There's a lot of things that people are writing in that are kind of tricky and creative right now as other. And then you would check off if there are any other addendums included to this purchase agreement. We're going to go over a lot of them in the last half hour. You will leave this checkbox blank when representing a buyer because you are just sending out the initial purchase agreement. But if you're representing a seller and you're executing this purchase agreement, if you have countered it for any reason, you'll put a checkbox in line 491. I'm a stickler on that in auditing. But for the purpose of today, just writing an offer and submitting it on your buyer, you're just going to leave that blank. And then it is the responsibility of the seller. So be watching this when you get your purchase agreements back when you represent a buyer. It's a responsibility of the seller and the seller's realtor to state either the seller is or is not a foreign person for that exact reason that I described before. We can't just hope and assume that a seller is not a foreign person. So when drafting this contract and sending it out on behalf of your buyer, you do have to leave it blank. From a best practice and being a true professional, I want you to be watching for it when you get the purchase agreement back.
Do you need some sort of written proof or you just take the seller's word?
They put it in the seller's disclosure and you really don't need written proof. But if you speculate, if you are worried, you work with your title company on it. And there have been a couple instances here where I've said like, gosh, we're not allowed to discriminate. I do not want to be discriminating, but I am representing the buyer as the broker. And I want you to double check and make sure that this person, like either they weren't thorough here, or they weren't thorough on the disclosure based on their names or whatever. We've done that extra checking. And it's really wise to do that. So you'll have your buyer, you'll either have them sign in ink or you'll fill in on Authentisign right here. You definitely want to make sure that you fill in the date and then you'll print their name as well. A lot of signatures, if people are hand signing it or if they're signing it on their computer screen, are really unclear. So it's a good idea to print their name underneath it always. You leave this final acceptance date blank until both parties have agreed. And then you remind them that they have the right to choose to either arbitrate or not arbitrate in a real estate transaction. It's a separate form and I'll go over it. So I usually leave this blank and say, I want to describe this to you in more detail, and then we're going to come back and sign this here. You also deserve to be informed that when you go to close on your mortgage, that there are going to be large sums of money that you're very likely wire transferring from one place to another. There have been some very sad and unfortunate situations of wire fraud. Some of them have been newsworthy here in the Twin Cities related to real estate. So you need to be understood. I mean, you need to make sure and very clearly understand who the invitation to send electronic wiring funds is coming from. We're going to work together to verify that it is accurate. If you suspect wire fraud, this is how you report it. And basically, this is just covering your buns to make sure that you are informing the consumer that you don't want them to be victims of wire fraud. I should have along the way been saving it, but I didn't. So just a reminder, go down here to file, save. It brings you right back to this exact page where you were working. And then now that we're to the end of the form, purchase agreement, we're going to go to save and exit. So that was the biggie. Anyone need like a shot of tequila or some caffeine? Okay. We're going to try to breeze through the rest of them. There are still quite a few, but they're very, very situational. So you're going to come back to me or Jessica if you want to utilize them. And for the purpose of today, I'm going to go through them kind of quickly with the exception of a couple. So arbitration is not an optional form. Arbitration is an alternative to going to conciliation court or hiring an attorney and literally filing a court case. Do you see it right there? Is it not in that order? I'm sorry. Is it a few forms away? Okay, I need to change that in my template. Actually, have you found it? Would you take it and put it right after? Yes. Thank you. Arbitration was designed to be a more cost-effective, affordable, quicker, and efficient form of handling disputes in real estate should a dispute arise. So the buyer and the seller do need to agree to either arbitrate or not arbitrate at the time that the offer is made and executed. So you are going to say to your buyers, we don't want there to be anything that comes up after closing, but if there is something that comes up after closing, have you heard of arbitration and how do you feel about arbitration? And most people are going to say like, I have no idea. I really have no idea. So you're going to say this was designed to be a convenience to you. It's designed to be less expensive and it's designed to be more personal. So let's just say after closing, something goes wrong and you find that the dishwasher leaked and it damaged the floor in the kitchen. You're going to either hire an attorney who's going to set a court date. You're going to sit in front of a judge who knows something about plumbing or doesn't know something about plumbing, and that judge is going to rule in either the buyer or the seller's favor. Or you can go through the arbitration system. You can pay a fee. You can file a claim. They would then assign a non-biased arbitrator who would come to your house where they could see the problem. You would be there. I would be there. The seller would be there, the seller's realtor would be there, and the resolution is decided right on the spot. So I can't give you legal advice, but I can tell you that right now you either need to agree to arbitrate or not arbitrate. How do you feel about it? Most people are going to say like, oh, I don't know. What do most people do? And most people do agree to arbitrate. So if they agree to arbitrate, they're going to, you're going to write the property address and the contract date in here, make sure that that's thoroughly filled out. Then they're going to sign and print their name here. You also are going to sign here. Keller Williams Preferred Realty is of the philosophy that arbitration is a good thing in real estate transactions. And we do want our agents to agree to it only if their clients agree to it. If your clients decline it, the proper way to handle this form is to draw a line and write declined. If they decline it and you just leave it blank here, it's super duper vague. Like, did the realtor even talk with the consumer about it? Like, was this properly, were they educated on this? Was this properly described to them? So it's really important that if they don't sign and agree, that you draw a line through and handwrite the word declined. Likewise, if this comes back from your seller and no one has signed it, you need to make sure and have the seller go back to their seller's realtor, go back to their clients and say like, all right, it seems you are declining this, but we need to draw a line through it and document it. Every now and then you'll see that a client signs it, but the realtor doesn't. And that's just every brokerage has a different philosophy, probably based on whether or not they've had to go through arbitration. And knock on wood, I've looked into it a couple times on my client's behalf and of realtors here at KWPR, but I've, knock on wood, not had to go through arbitration. I'll let you know in an update if I ever have to do that. Any questions about it? All right, if you are helping someone buy a home in a community that has an association, so that's not just a condo, that's not just a townhome that's attached. There's a lot of single family communities that are in these master planned communities that have pools, or maybe they just have a monument at the front entrance of the neighborhood, but there's association documents that have been drafted. Am I out of order again?
No, I was just making
Okay.
sure I didn't start writing on.
Okay, cool.
The wrong book.
It is absolutely a requirement, according to state statute, that those association documents be presented to your buyer to make sure your buyer understands exactly what they're getting into. And then, once they're presented, they have 10 days to review them, decide if they can live within that or not, like those rules and regulations and all that kind of thing. They can, at that point, choose to shorten this 10-day disclosure, but they can't waive it from the very beginning. It is state statute. This has to be included if you're buying a home within an association. So it's really just descriptive. There's not a lot of blanks or anything that you put in there. But again, as homework, this is really something that you should be reading. And then the buyers will sign it and the sellers will sign it. Oops. Ah. All right. If it's in a townhome association, it is incredibly important that you, as the professional, make sure that you create this receipt for your buyers. All right, so you're gonna say, my buyers are purchasing 123 Main Street in Minneapolis and Hennepin County. It might have a unit number. And now the seller has emailed me a bunch of stuff. And so I'm going to go through all that stuff. Literally, it can be like hundreds of pages, but you have to go through all that stuff and you're going to say, okay, they've given me a resale disclosure statement. They've also given me declarations for this association. Oh, and the master planned association as well. That's the one who actually has the workout center. Just my association has the monuments. This community has been in existence since 1978. So it looks like there have been amendments or changes to the rules of the association. Articles of incorporation, bylaws, rules and regulations is really what's going to be most important to your client, and the proposed annual budget. Now, these are all best practice to have all of these things. If you don't get all these things, it probably is okay, but you're going to want to make sure and say, yep, these are all the things that the seller gave me that I am now about to pass on to my client. You're also going to go back into the listing agreement and you're going to say, oh yeah, it was listed in here that this is the monthly association fee, that this is the association management contact information. You're going to call them first to make sure it's the accurate information, because a lot of realtors, just when working fast, they just go off an old listing or a neighbor listing and it could be wrong. So you, as the true professional, are going to check and make sure it's right. And then you're going to have your client sign here saying, yep, indeed, I have received all these things. You will be working so fast and there's so many things to think about. Some realtors in the checklist, when they upload them on command, just send me emails back and forth, like a screenshot of those emails saying like, yep, indeed, I sent it over to my buyer. That's okay. But if you and I have to go into some sort of court case or ethics hearing or something, you're going to say like, dang, why didn't I take 10 minutes to just review those documents, put all these check marks in, and have my buyer sign it to say, indeed, I received it. This was the date and the time that I received it. So please, please, please do this for me. It's something that I'm not seeing enough of as I audit files, but it is really important and it's really helpful. If your buyer has to sell a home before they can buy the house that they're offering on, now this isn't going to fly if they're buying a $300,000 home in 2021. But let's say they're buying a $2 million house in 2021. Those aren't selling quite as quickly. So maybe they need to sell their $500,000 house before they can do that. And I think the seller of the $2 million house is going to say, yep, that makes sense and I agree. You're going to check box 1 on the purchase agreement where I said there's those 3 options. And you're gonna say, okay, good. Well, so we're making an offer, but we need you to know that we own our home here and here's the address. That it is not yet listed with me, but I plan to put it on the market within, let's just say 7 days or whatever date, you think is fair. Or maybe it is already listed with us, which would be great, but for some reason it's not sold. Oh, maybe it's because it's a $1.5 million house or something like that. And this just outlines that indeed you are protecting your buyer, that they would not be contractually obligated to buy the new home until they sell this one. So it's a protection for them. There may be a handful of things that you want to put on an addendum. Now, it's important to remember the distinction between addendum and amendment. So an addendum is something that you include in the initial offer saying, I'm adding these terms to the contract. So maybe you say something like, oh God, I can't even think, like some sort of tricky wording because you really want your buyer to get it. You would put it here on the addendum, like this purchase agreement, offer price is $200,000, but there's an escalation clause up to $225,000 and $5,000 increments, blah, 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 blah. You can put that on an addendum. But if you agreed and contracted with the seller to buy this townhome for $200,000, and now after the fact, you decide like, hey, we've been talking a little bit more and we absolutely love those shelves in the garage. Can we now talk about, would you be willing to leave those? And this is now a week after you agreed to buy the house. Then it becomes an amendment to the contract because you're amending the original terms, or you're amending, not just adding on to it. So that's the difference between an addendum and amendment, which you'll see in here. It's really important. I probably should. I'm going to clean up the order of this and clean up those packets. I'm sorry if it's not in the exact right order. But go to the one that says, we're going to go to the counteroffer, addendum to purchase agreement counteroffer. So let's say you made the offer on the purchase agreement at $200,000, and the seller countered back to you and said, nope, I'm only going to sell you my house if you buy it for $250,000. So now the tennis ball is kind of back in your court as you're having this back and forth kind of popcorn of like, you're representing your buyer, they're representing the seller. And you're going to say, your buyer is going to say, no way, I cannot afford $250,000. No, thank you. You're going to say, well, okay, if not 250, but they won't accept 200, is there a number that you do feel comfortable at? And they're going to say, well, maybe 210. Like, let's try countering back at 210. So you would go in and you would generate this counteroffer addendum, and you would write today's date. And you would say, we had made the offer to them yesterday. So you'd say the date of the offer is, whatever is on the purchase agreement. You're going to put the property in here again, and you're going to say, okay, all right, well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, let's try this. Let's say we're going to buy the house for $215,000. Oh, and to sweeten the deal, we're going to say that we're now giving you $10,000 earnest money rather than the $2,000 that we did initially. And we're going to say, and I will name my firstborn child after you. Whatever, So you're going to write additional terms in here, or you're going to follow these check boxes. You are then going to, have the buyer sign it. You're going to send it back. If they accept it, if the seller agrees to it, at some point, they are going to then write in, they're going to sign it and date it here, but the seller is also going to write the final acceptance date. If this is something that the seller generated and sent to you as the buyer's representative, like you made an offer at 200, but we want to come up to 215, and we want you to do $10,000 of earnest money. And your client says, your buyer says, oh yeah, actually that does work for me. I am willing to do that. The seller would have signed it and dated it and presented it to you. You then need to have your buyer sign and date here, and you would write in then the final acceptance date that they're signing it. The final acceptance date is really important. It's on here, and it's also on the purchase agreement if there aren't any counters. The final acceptance date is really important because that's what generates go time and like the start date on things like the home inspection contingency timeframe. Make sense? All right, just a couple more. I promise we are almost done. I talked about if the seller is going to live in the house for longer than after the closing date, and that's called a seller rent back. Is that in the packet? I actually think I just added this. I think I just added this. So we're gonna do, what do we have here? 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna print this. Shoot, I hope I have this printer right. See if it comes out for you. Oh, shoot. You know what? I'll do it from my desk and give it to you guys because it is something that I'm seeing quite a bit right now. Either it's included as a part of the purchase agreement, which would be an addendum, or you're adding it on after the fact, which would be an amendment. You put whatever date is that you're generating it as compared to the date that the purchase agreement was generated. And then this is essentially just like a summarized lease. So it talks about who has the insurance on it, who pays the utilities on it, who maintains it. But the possession date that the seller would receive possession to the property would be the date of closing, or, you know, give them a certain time. And then it would be really, really, really important to collect on the date of closing a security deposit, because if something does go wrong in that, call it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 1 month, it's maximum of 2 months that the seller can live there on a rent back agreement. If something does go wrong and you need to file an insurance claim, or your buyer needs to file an insurance claim, you want that security deposit to be at least the cost of what their insurance deductible is. You can charge them rent. You don't have to charge them rent. I think you might as well. I mean, you've got a mortgage payment that you're paying, right? So that would be where you list in the rent back fee. Does that make sense? I know this is getting to be really a lot, but we've got 5 minutes left and we are going to wrap her up. Is there a seller's disclosure statement in your packet?
We have compensation disclosure to buyers/tenants and amendment to purchase agreement.
Okay. So not in your packet, but I'm just going to go over literally for 2 minutes. This is a seller's property disclosure statement. It is in the seller's packet. This is not something that you need to have the buyers fill out. This is something that the buyers will receive. And remember, you've checked on the purchase agreement. Either they have a seller's disclosure, a seller's disclosure alternative, or an other you've written they don't have either. But I want you to see that it is really thorough. It is really detailed. It's a big job for the seller to fill it out, but it's rich with valuable information for the buyer to be aware of. So that is the seller's disclosure. I'm going to take it out of here, I think, for future presentations. But last but not least is the compensation disclosure to the buyer. So this is you, either when you make the offer or once the buyer has been notified that they are the ones who got the house and the purchase agreement has been executed, you need to make sure, and this is state statute as well, you need to make sure and disclose to them or remind them you are being paid commission for helping them buy this house. It's your real estate brokerage that's receiving most often 2.7% of the sales price. But then they have to be reminded that they have that $3.99 broker administrative fee that is not paid for by the seller. It actually comes from them as a part of their closing costs. So you fill in their name. This one actually does have their address and their email on here. I'm not exactly sure why. You can be kind of general about that if you're running short on time. I like to see the forms filled out thoroughly, but it's not as important on here. This is something that they sign and that you sign, just so that it's fully transparent, so no one can come back and say, like, I felt like it was real, you know, kind of vague about, like, this realtor claims they're working for me for free, that it's paid for by the seller. What exactly does that mean? This protects you and the brokerage to make sure that you have thoroughly educated the buyer how you get paid for the work that you do. So there you have it. That is all the buyer docs. If anyone wants to stick around, I'll print off that seller rent back for you. Questions? I mean, I'm sure there's a million, right? But none right now.
Not right now.
Quick one that I have is that when you represent the seller, is there anything in the contract saying that they should be out of the house and living in the house?
There is something that says they have to give you access to the house, but I don't think it says they have to be out.
They don't have to be out?
No. It would be very awkward for them to be there. I've had a few of those. But I don't think it's in the documentation that says they're required to be out. How did your open house go, by the way?
Good, there's less traffic. I think they could, I imagine that they got multiple offers, so.
Did you meet anyone who was unrepresented? Did you have?
No, we fill out the forms and stuff like that. But it was great. We had a good time. Went to the neighbors.
I was gonna say, how was the door knocking?
And they all knew each other, they all hung out, and they're like, oh, we love them, we've never been there, good luck. So that was a nice thing to be able to offer to the buyers, that this is a really tight knit neighborhood.
Oh, yeah.
So,
Oh, that's true.
yeah, so added value there.
For sure.
Lots of different kinds of agents, though, that you meet.
Isn't it the truth?
Yeah, they're every type, that's like, oh, grumpy, judgy. Very nice.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah, and then the, incognito agent, that doesn't say anything until they're kind of pressed, like, oh, no, I'm wondering.
Yeah, when they sign in.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and be sneaky.
Well, this is all just the tip of the iceberg. I know it's overwhelming, but we want to help you feel educated and feel empowered. So save my business card, use me as a resource. Jessica's your first line of front line for first responder phone calls, but I'm here to help too. I hope you found this to be educational.
Very much so.
Yeah. Thank you.
Good. Good luck writing your first purchase agreement. I'm going to go in my office. I'm going to print them for the extra packets here. So stick around if you want one of those. Solid next
Yes, we need to probably. Just walking through. Should have went to Karen's first.
It's Cody, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so you're doing orientation with him at
Yeah.
12:30? Yeah.
Yeah, or just even, how am I gonna, that's just my other options. But it just makes it like very easy. Of course, but but I want to try.
Yeah.
Just read through this. I don't have any questions. Yeah, I know when I buy houses, then I have it already done. Yeah, I'm just kinda like, you know what, no. Good, that's good. I'm okay with blue. What do you mean, purple, blue, you're not looking.
It's so funny.
There. Okay.
My mother-in-law, she probably not healthy, so you should not be that way. She did.
Well, that's good. I mean, I do think it seems reasonable to have. Just cover your own. Yeah. And maybe not like first time. Oh, yeah, and then tomorrow.
Thank you for, Terry.
Oh, yeah, did you
See
all?
on Friday.
Oh, great.
Yes. And I have another big thing to go to.
It's on that. Yeah, let me know what you think of this pricing, because I always. I don't know. If the pricing you get from it is different than what you get
Yes,
from
that
it.
might,
The other guy got
Is it on that?
Per room.
Oh,
but it's like,
oh, I don't know if Terry would go that low, but.
No, I know. But maybe you would like. included with the
No,
water,
I
whatever.
mean, this like post in my dining room, like, she and Mary, start to finish. I want to say
Oh, yes.
or just whatever it is. It
Yeah,
was my birthday.
I
present
have
to my
those
mom.
ones too.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks.
Did you get the material? Did you change the
Maybe I-
colors? or-
yeah. And actually, I wanted this very custom color, and I spent a lot of time trying to get it through the Sherman Williams that he uses. So to me, like, it's a little offset. That's the first time that I have been love color. So like, I kind of want to be like, I was going to cool. And it's like, yeah. So
Oh, yeah. Oh, I
so,
suppose I did.
yeah, it's technically Thursday. Oh, fun.
And she woke up today at 3:30. And, so now she started with the full.
Yeah, I haven't had any
This
kind of start. Oh, yeah, now they know how to work it.
is the first time.
Oh, okay.
It's just, it's fine. The golden is like, okay, so, we'll go downstairs, I'm not gonna say. "Oh, okay, okay. She's doing great. I'm done. Let's go."
Oh, yeah. I got up at 3 in the morning to make this, and then she.
We had that here.
I think that just puts you in the.
Yesterday, Martin was fun. I made something.
Just, yeah, because. And it's nothing like food, so I want her to have a very healthy relationship with food. So we don't use food as a reward, we don't use it as a punishment, like we keep talking about.
Oh, I got
body. That's all it is, and never gonna get worse. But I'm also not gonna offer you something else. So there is no alternative, you know, if you have to eat vegetables, I don't care. There is, you have to eat vegetables. And then.
Okay, we can all know. You're old school.
I don't know, they,
Yeah, that's what, that's what she was saying. Yeah, and I like know there's like multiple small ones, which I also first like. And now with just the toast concert. And so I'm helping choices. I don't know if you snack for but you know, you think about like I made her lunch and then I made. See those?
well, that's why I was like, I plan on asking.
Guacamole, with some cucumbers and some carrots and like, she just keep, and I'm just thinking like, I'm handing her like enough for, so I'm like, make it through.
There
to,
you go,
you know,
here.
to get to the hour where they give you more snacks. And then immediately.
Is there gonna be much more going here? Is that like a really, in terms of?
No, I don't think so. I mean, they use it for materials from various classes. But they're like, I think that'll be good.
I know, yeah, it's a tough thing. Like, it's just. And that was very good.
Good.
Although
Maybe,
this one gives me a little more nerves than the color.
maybe 4 hours. Like I started thinking, we should. split them out.
I think it's okay.
I like it, I like it.
Because then it's like, they're complete.
Okay, okay.
That's just my own.
Yes, then it is complete. Yeah, you're absolutely right. About that. I'm sorry. Come on.
Well, that's right. We're gonna see you in about a half an hour.
Yep, have room.
What do you guys have today?
We're gonna use your chat.
Oh,
Or
wow.
whatever. I don't know.
You are getting it all.
I know.
Yeah, which is great.
Who is on it?
Chelsea.
She does not.
Yeah, she does.
Which one?
She really likes the white sweet onions and stuff. So like in our garden this year, I've got
Wow. So
because I
nice.
figure, I mean, like it's supposed to be so good for you. Granted, her breath rate's pretty bad after, but
Garlic,
But onions are good for you? I didn't know that.
onions are very good for you.
They are. How so?
You know, they say like the easy way to do it is like almost every vegetable looks like a human organ, and it kind of helps that one, and that one's like the
No way.
That's what they say, yeah.
You are
Because it has like
kidding.
all kinds of antioxidants.
Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
it's super
How
good
did I
for you.
know this?
And you know that most unsung vegetable here, celery. It is magic. It's not
Celery is
waste.
amazing.
It's not,
Kiwi
I would
is
say like,
amazing too.
oh,
For
yeah.
real?
so amazing.
Kiwi
How did
is
I
like,
know this?
So I'm also growing some celery in my garden. I've got my little baby house going, so I will bring you some fresh from the garden, bright, green, yummy
Wouldn't that
celery.
be a treat? Okay, so the place that I like that I eat, white onions the most is at Charlie's, which is a restaurant, South Metro here. They have kind of like Chipotle makes a bowl, you know? So it's like rice, and then they're kind of famous for this chicken tinga. I like it with shrimp, just a bit of rice. And then they can get right, and then they also have all this like Chipotle kind of standard stuff, you know, like beans and corn and whatever. But they use an abundance of fresh white onions, and the crunch in there is just like so good. So now when I eat it, I can
You're doing
consider it
it right
good for my
again.
health.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Super,
I always
super
just thought it was
Smother
like
and cheese is so good for you.
the cilantro. That's good for
that's
you?
what people
Oh,
said, you actually boil it with water and drink the water and it cleans the whole system.
What?
Cilantro is very,
Jesus,
very
so-
good.
Yes, that's what some people say. I love it. I love it. I love it.
I choke it down because everybody else likes it. I have it in my herb garden.
I choke it down. Cody, are you not interested in our food tips? We're so girly.
I use parsley for it, but it's, yeah, I do love my husband put in a bunch of like window boxes on the top of my deck. So like I just got like, all my herbs. So it's just, I love going out there.
Yes.
I pretend like I'm a shaman, like I know what I'm doing, you know? But I start everything I cook with carrots, onions, and celery. That's the basic start. And,
It's a good soup stuff.
yeah, I mean, I do not just soup, but everything I cook, basically, I start with them. So I figure I can like shove some veggies in like secretly.
Yes.
How to do it.
Oh, I just made some delicious steak and potato soup. Oh my God.
Really?
Yes. So on Sundays, my husband tends to smoke a couple meats, so we have meat ready to go for the week.
Yeah.
And then I use the rest in the soup, and it was just so easy, like some frozen vegetables that, you know, that the tripeptide mentioned. Boil it up, and you're good to go.
Cool.
Throw in some, I forgot my favorite herb. Just right here.
Basil.
Parsley.
Yeah, no,
Dill?
Oh, deal.
no. Oh my
Favorite
God. This is
herb?
good. Yes, I'll take a
Sage.
picture, send it to you later.
How are you not knowing this? Can you just buy it anywhere? Or is it rare?
No, you can buy it anywhere now. Oh, yeah, the rare one I do love is, it's the red tree that's supposed to be poisonous. Sumac, yeah, that's my favorite. I
Oh,
put
I
that
love
on
sumac.
chicken.
Oh, that's an
okay,
herb?
I've got, yes, oh my God, I've got
That
like a bucket
has-
of it. It's-
Magic by itself. That has a lot of vitamin A, I believe. It's insanely good for you.
Oh,
You know
so
what you
tangy,
do?
yeah.
I'll talk to you about the onion. So you have yellow onion, chop it up, with a lot of olive oil, sumac,
Yeah.
salt.
Yeah.
And you just shake it, you put it in the fridge for 2 days. And
Oh,
you
really?
eat it on the side of the dish. It's
Oh
unbelievable.
my God.
Like, where do
You
you
have
get
sumac?
sumac? I'm like.
Yes, I
super
have like
intrigued
a
with
lot
that.
of sumac in my food.
Where do you get it?
You can actually get it around here too. My friend went to Thailand and I go, because I first got it when I went to Egypt and I brought home sumac and I like treated it like gold, like don't touch my sumac. You know,
Yes.
like,
Wow.
And then she went to Thailand and can you please pick me up and some and you know, she put like a box, she brought me home like 4 bags. And then I found it on
Amazon for $10, I think.
Yep, so you can get it on Amazon.
No way.
Yeah, you
Yeah, and it's a beautiful color too,
Oh.
so it just like brightens everything up. And it's not spicy, you know, it's just.
It's more citrus, I
tangy.
think, yeah.
Wow. Okay, you don't need to bring me a blizzard anymore. Just make me something
Yeah,
like that.
I'm gonna make these onions, so you don't even cook it, you just
No,
shake
no,
it
no,
raw.
just raw, a lot of olive oil,
Yeah.
so, don't put, lemon.
Okay,
Just put
so like
sumac.
little Himalayan, I love that pink Himalayan.
We have-
salt.
Yeah, me too.
That's the only one we use.
Wow.
I got the greatest salt pepper shakers, the gravity kind. That is so nice, because like you're working with the meat with one hand, so you can just like. You know,
Really?
you gotta wash your hands and, yeah, they're so great. Like $30 on Amazon, they like light up blue and they flip them over. It's
I've
no
got so
hands.
many things that
So
we haven't
good.
even opened yet. I got my KitchenAid, and I have it, but nobody's touching this. This is my.
Don't touch
That'll
mine.
get very, yeah. I
Yeah.
work in the kitchen, so.
Oh,
for
yeah,
me,
of course, yeah,
it's my
I know.
Like, don't touch the energy, food processor.
Nice. I still don't believe that you made great cake.
Oh, I am the best. I cook for.
I know, I want you to.
I cook for, trust me, I don't even want to tell you. Like,
Okay, proud
French
mama
people were
moment.
like, this is the best prep I've ever had.
Oh, and I
Okay,
don't.
I have to show you a picture of a proud mama moment. I'll
Oh,
bring it up.
let me see.
Melissa's got daughters at the same age as Josie.
Eight, right, eight?
Yeah, well, like, I think hers are like 7 and 10. So like, yeah, they've had a couple play dates. She lives on the lake with a pool. So it's kind of a
Oh,
fun,
that's
like, play date.
amazing.
I was just talking about your awesome little girls, and like your school setup and having some play dates.
Oh, yeah.
We're overdue for a play date.
We are,
That's stupid, you know, Corona.
my older daughter, I have had a lot of food, and I have a lot of beautiful food. I mean, yes, right? And so I like to look like.
How's it going?
Yeah, how about you?
Good, are you done? That's it?
No,
Come on already.
I know. I test Monday for state, so
You done, I think you're done. I told you that like
know.
weeks ago.
I've been watching everything, studying. I just want to get it done.
I feel like everything I studied was not on there. It was just the most random questions. Like,
That's what Paola said. Yeah.
and it's much easier than you think.
You should have done it a while, 2 weeks ago, we would have passed, honestly.
I hope so.
I know that.
I hope I just want to pass it.
Let me know.
I know I will.
All right.
Time together.
Yes.
She's a very moody, annoying teen. She's 11.
Oh, yeah.
But she also is like getting to the stage where things are clicking, you know, like she did something for a friend whose grandmother had passed away, and her friend just passed away in October, so she was like, she's getting to be like a good
Yeah, like, oh, you're training.
yeah, yes, so she made a crib cake, and it was so delicious.
That is beautiful.
She slowly, carefully, like separated the cake batter out and colored them, and then slowly, carefully on the kitchen stove, every single crib, and with whipped cream, put a little bit in between, that wasn't much.
I'm impressed.
That's great.
Oh, beautiful.
Isn't that cute?
That's beautiful.
Oh,
Yes.
She did wonderful.
I used to do sushi crepes. I don't know who those are. It's like it's huge. I'm a foodie. I'm like Gordon Ramsay. I'm like, I would pay.
That's
I
I
want
was
to
all
go
I do is watch fucking house porn. Like, that's all I do. It's between one. Yeah, it's like,
that's so perfect.
it's like 100 and 102. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back. Record,
Now the house
record.
stuff is incredibly applicable, right?
Oh, it's a sushi with and that's kind
I used to make them, roll them, cut them, and then instead of the wasabi, you know, with different like walnuts or whatever. It's just, I had a piece of clay that I used to make and you could cut it. Yeah, I did a lot of. I did it
How
for a lot.
fun.
Wait, no, it sounds like you're passionate. You talked about it before. It sounds just amazing.
Yeah, I work-
Yeah, and I'm
Nothing
looking
like
up
food,
college
honestly.
herbs. 'Cause this is bugging me. This-
Your favorite herb.
I know, it's right there. It's where menopause, like, really jacked with your brain. So, watch out.
The May calendar? Do they have
No,
a May
I
calendar?
saw a draft.
Oh, the
and there's-
20, I saw something on the 25th. Oh, they have the hair shop.
Yep.
You don't need that. Yours is like perfection.
Thank you.
Perfection. I absolutely love it.
Thank you. I have like 9 of them.
The
He did a
pictures?
great, yeah, he spent hours. Wow, he was really fun. And we have somebody we never use, you know, riding his bike
Was
around.
it here or?
No,
you
he's in
just met?
Jordan, and he's this Russian guy, really young man. He does a lot of modeling shoots.
Yeah.
And stuff, and he's actually does houses for really like reasonable package. He's just got the eye, you know, so it's.
You can see it. It's just already, it's just perfection. Like you don't have to change yet. I don't see a lot of those. I don't know.
I-
if we need
you
to
know,
pay
and
for
it's-
it, though.
What's that?
That it's perfection to come, but I don't know if we need to pay.
I think it's free. That would be my guess. But if you do pay for them, like my guy was expensive, but I did like 5 wardrobe changes. And it was hair, makeup, no, hair touch up. And then he does makeup.
He doesn't.
Well, no, he has our artists come in.
How much was it? Like the whole thing?
Say, but that was for everything. That was for makeup and everything too. You know, and I've got a lot of shots that I use for years. So I've got some like opening doors. I have some action. You know, I hate this.
It's a one-time rule, I know that.
Yes, I mean, it's a one like every 5.
They're like, hey, you're 20
It's like, well, like Melissa never ages like her. At one headshot, she was super old, but like she looks the same because she's always looked like she looked the same in high school.
They have something on the site, they. What?
Oh, hey, are you gonna do Feed My Starving Children?
What do we do?
You just have to sign up, and then have you ever done it before? Oh, it's really fun. We've done it as a family. I've done it at work, and it's you go through, and it's real. You get in the at least before the Rona. I don't really know how it is now, but you get in a group, and like everyone has a process. Like you're filling a little bag of food that will feed a child for 3 meals or something, or three children. And then it's like a half ounce of this, blah, 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 tie, seal, and you race each other. So you try to try to go as fast as you possibly can while not screwing up. And then at the end, you just fed, it's like a 1 or 2 hour slide. And then,
Cool.
yeah, it's a fun thing. You feel good about it. They show you videos at the beginning about like, the children that are underfed, and this is where the food goes. And for $2,
I like that. So you're the one who actually target, you bring the food too?
Nope. It's all stuff they have, and so you just go there ready to participate. They'll give you the hairnet and everything, and then they'll do a video in the beginning about like this is what it is. And then I don't know, like it's Keller Williams, if you just how many you've signed up. But there's often other groups and stuff. It's a big room full of like 10 stations, 20 stations, whatever. I'm assuming it's at the main place, and that's on St. Chanhassen or something like that. So not far, but it's on May 15th, I think. You have to sign up. And then May 21st, we have to go to Ignite Light. It's 9 to 4. Yeah, I've got a lot of other things to manage. So, and then when they move over, it's like, oh God, I built it around the big Tuesday. So now I have to undo. It's just too much. It is. I was really struggling yesterday, and just like, and then because last week I basically worked every day of the week. I was like, well, I feel like I can keep up with pace. It's like, well, not really. It's like, hey, so I ended up watching The Crown. But that trying to find that balance. I've done enough.
I think it's not something.
Yeah.
Thanks to her.
Oh, yeah.
Not that it matters.
I'm bringing in very
Enjoy.
Yeah, feel free to come closer.
I do. How are you? Good.
Oh, you did.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Good.
No, I would say, I might try to catch, a few times. Try to catch them around.
Yeah, like honestly, our heart, especially since we're already out there. We have a Facebook page that immediately goes on there and watch out vacuum sales people, because we've got cameras in the front, and it's just like maybe it's because it's all back to like all of the Chicago kids coming to sell.
Oh, man, that's part two. I have Aubrey Leisure on the other line. She has a closing. She just got a closing disclosure, which is what brought it to her attention. She showed and sold a house that was listed on the internet for buyer realtor cooperation commission. But now she sees that the listing realtor himself charged the client 6%, and she's feeling frustrated and annoyed that he didn't a lot pay out more. She wonders if there's anything that she can do. And I told her I can tell that the advertised cooperating commission is what it is and how the listing realtor can charge.
Or something wrong. Something like it.
Yeah, okay, hang on a second, I'm just gonna merge, just gonna merge this. Hey, guys, are you both there? Aubrey and Steve? Aubrey, are you still there? Yeah, Steve, are you there? Okay, Aubrey, I described the situation with Steve and he has the same sentiment. Okay.
I've never seen anybody else do that. But then the actual
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry. Good call. All right, well, congrats on the full thing. Thanks, Steve. Yes, of course.
much more. Yeah, she was. I think we will. You know what I get? I don't need this. I think we went through with the health. Oh, nice. I recently found set up. It felt great. It's people just like it piles up on me. And I get like, I'll just put it up. It's no fear somewhere. I have all these systems set up. Like figure out empty baskets. I'll just piling up.
Are you doing a classroom here? Cody? Where have you went?
Let's see you do. So are you going tomorrow? I am not. So productivity. Yeah, and it looked like you just, it's just like I think he's so much. Hello, Sensei.
Hello.